All right, they heard the final arguments for the USS Cole bombing pretrial hearings yesterday, and so let's get right to it. The article is from Cal Rosenberg of the New York Times. Judge to decide whether taint of CIA torture extends to Guantanamo. More than 22 years after Al-Qaeda bombed the USS Cole and nearly 12 years after a prisoner was first charged with plotting the attack, a judge heard final arguments Friday on a fundamental question in the pretrial phase of the case. Can the accused bomber's confession, after years in CIA custody, be used against him? We're going to be talking about that because I have the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence regarding the CIA's torture and rendition program regarding al-Nashiri. I'm going to read that in a minute. The judge, Colonel Lanny Acosta Jr., acknowledged that potentially relevant information was still being given to defense lawyers in the case. They said it was time to resolve a key obstacle in the long wait for the death penalty trial of Abd al-Rahim al-Nashiri. Colonel Acosta will retire from the Army in September. Has long been determined to wrap up a portion of the pretrial phase, focusing on the legacy of CIA torture. Closing arguments, he confronted several issues straight on, including whether the CIA did to the defendant, waterboarding him, depriving him of sleep, holding him nude in solitary confinement, constituted torture or cruel and inhumane treatment. Ed Ryan, the prosecutor for Justice Department, said, "I do not concede that at this time." That's not torture, I guess, to the prosecution, right? Because they know the entire case rests on this issue, and the judge, Acosta, will make his determination based on that. By day's end, however, Mr. Ryan acknowledged that the Justice Department had already conceded that what Mr. Nashiri told interrogators in the CIA custody should be treated as statements obtained by use of torture or by cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment. Bang, there it is. Nevertheless, Mr. Ryan argued that once at Guantanamo, Mr. Nashiri voluntarily took part in 3 days of interrogations by government agents in 2007 and incriminated himself about his role in the sneak attack bombing of the USS Cole that resulted in the death of 17 Naval Service members. That doesn't mean nothing, because they could probably have told him, if you don't say anything, we're going to torture you afterwards, or threaten him. Now, I want to bring up a part of that cable, or the Senate intelligence report regarding al-Nashiri, and what the CIA's own directors of the SEER program, James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, said about al-Nashiri. So I'm going to basically disappear for a second so you can read. In January 2003, CIA contractor Dunbar arrived at detention site Blue. Dunbar is in Swigert. Dunbar and Swigert are James Mitchell and Bruce Jensen. CIA contractor Dunbar arrived at detention site Blue, which is a CIA black site, to conduct a psychological interrogation assessment to judge al-Nashiri's sustainability for the additional use of CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques, torture, and develop recommendations for his interrogation. The resulting interrogation plan proposed that the interrogators would have the latitude to use the full range of enhanced exploitation and interrogation measures, meaning that they can torture the living shit out of them, adding that the use of the waterboard would require additional support from fellow CIA contractor Grayson Swigert. According to the interrogation plan, once the interrogators had eliminated al-Nashiri's sense of control and predictability and established a desired level of helplessness, they would reduce the use of the CIA's enhanced interrogation techniques and transition to a debriefing phase once again. In other words, they wanted to completely break him. To completely break him. And in order to do that, they needed to waterboard him, to wall him, put him in stress positions, naked, and whatnot, right? But let's read on. After receiving the proposed interrogation plan for al-Nashiri on January 21st, 2003, the CIA's chief of interrogations, whose presence had previously prompted al-Nashiri to tremble in fear, emailed CIA colleagues to notify them that he had informed the front office of the Counterterrorism Center that he would no longer be associated in any way with the interrogation program due to serious reservations he had about the current state of affairs, and would instead be retiring shortly. In the same email, Blank wrote, "If this is a train wreck waiting to happen, and I intend to get the hell off the train before it happens." Blank drafted a cable of CIA headquarters to send to detention site Blue, raising a number of concerns that he, the chief of interrogations, believes should be entered for the record. The CIA headquarters cable, which does not appear to have been disseminated, wasn't shared with detention site Blue, included the following, and this is really important. Quote, "We have serious reservations with the continued use of enhanced interrogation techniques with al-Nashiri and its long-term impact on him. Al-Nashiri has been held for 3 months in very difficult conditions, both physically and mentally. It is the assessment of the prior interrogations that al-Nashiri had been mainly truthful and is not withholding significant information. To continue to use enhanced interrogation techniques without clear indications that he is withholding important info is excessive and may cause him to cease cooperation on any level. Al-Nashiri may come to the conclusion that whether he cooperates or not, he will continually be subjected to enhancing techniques. Therefore, what is the incentive for continued cooperation?" Also, both Counterterrorism Center, Chief of Counterterrorism Center, and HVT interrogator, Blank, who departed detention site Blue in January, believe continued enhanced methods may push al-Nashiri over the edge psychologically. There you have it. They were warned at the CIA black sites that continue to use enhanced techniques on al-Nashiri, it would break them. But that's exactly what they wanted. But where did the order come from? Well, it came from Jessen and Mitchell, CIA contractors. But let's get back to the article. Nevertheless, okay, Mr. Ryan devoted much of his argument to reading from a 34-page account of the interrogation by federal agents and intercepted communications from the prisoner in the months after he reached Guantanamo Bay that cast him as boastful and at times arrogant prisoner who spoke to his interrogators freely. To illustrate that Mr. Nashiri understood this, Mr. Ryan quoted from intercepted advice. Mr. Nashiri gave another prisoner at Guantanamo that meeting with these people is not mandatory. Deny everything. Or rather than deny everything, Mr. Ryan said the defendant admitted to being Bilal, a man who rented a house and moved money used in the attack by 2 suicide bombers on the American destroyer in a harbor in Aden, Yemen on October 12, 2000. Annie Morgan, a defense lawyer, portrayed the Saudi prisoner as a broken man at the time of his 2007 interrogations. In fact, that's even backed up by the CIA itself, because the CIA said later on, and I did a video prior to this about the CIA saying that Mr. Nashiri is near brain dead, and didn't believe him when they said he was the mastermind of USS Cole. They said, "You're too simple-minded to operate such an elaborate operation." The CIA said that. He had already been interrogated 200 times in CIA custody, had no reason to believe that another American in another polo shirt coming to question him would not hurt him, because they tortured him for years. He's not going to believe anything the Americans say. "There is nothing voluntary when you assess the totality of the circumstances," Ms. Morgan said. She reminded the judge that Mr. Nashiri's questioning by different interrogators, so-called clean teams, at Guantanamo in 2007 was held in Camp Echo, the same facility on the U.S. Navy that had served earlier as a secret CIA prison, a black site. Mr. Nashiri was held there in 2003 until he was kicked out of Guantanamo Bay for behavior issues, she said. He was sent to another CIA black site, this one in Europe, as punishment, and was raped, she said, referring to the time a CIA employee forced a breathing tube into his rectum in a discredited medical procedure. 4 months after his return to Guantanamo in September 2006, the FBI carried out the interrogations in Camp Echo, which had been repurposed for military use. The judge asked about testimony records from 2006 and 2007 that portrayed the prisoner at the time as projecting free will, sometimes belligerent, controlling the pace of interrogations, and aware of his rights. Ms. Morgan pointed to the U.S. government's recent disclosure of a secret cache of videos, which I mentioned in the other video, of Mr. Nashiri being forcibly removed from his cell in 2006 and 2007. This is someone who was given up, she said. Some of the videos were screened for the judge on Friday in a classified portion of the closing arguments that excluded both the public and the defendant. In other words, even the defense couldn't see the video. How about that? How about that for rights? She also cited a recently disclosed CIA exploitation plan from 2004 that described Mr. Nashiri as not able to engage in conversation, struggling to answer yes or no questions, and showing signs of dyslexia. Like I showed you in the intelligence report, the continued use of enhanced interrogation techniques would break al-Nashiri psychologically. That was coming from the chief of interrogations at that CIA black site, detention site Blue. A crux of the question confronting the judge is the principle of annotation, how to get an untainted confession after a coerced one. Mr. Ryan said the clean team interrogations at Guantanamo in 2007 met the legal standard of a change in time, change in place, and change in identity of the questioner. Judge Acosta sounded skeptical. Good. He said legal precedents were on episodes that did not compare to what happened to Mr. Nashiri in the black sites. At one point, he ticked off this list of treatment, quote, the waterboarding, the box, the walling, the slaps, etc., the way in which he was shackled, solitary confinement, no bedding, concrete floor, stripped, shaved, end quote. After a pause, he added sleep deprivation. The judge cited testimony from the psychologists who, as CIA contractors, waterboarded Mr. Nashiri in Thailand in 2002. They had said their enhanced interrogation techniques were intended to create a social contract. As long as the prisoners cooperated, they would not return to the bad times. In other words, do as I say, or else you'll face harsh consequences. That's not under free will. The judge acknowledged this week that prosecutors were still finding and preparing classified evidence for the case, including more videos from Guantanamo that were being sanitized of certain national security secrets before the judge and defense lawyers could see them. In other words, we must screen the unfettered evidence. So this way, we take out the torture parts, and so you won't make a decision on the torture of the prisoner, and all the evidence is thrown out in court. That's exactly what's going to happen. Colonel Acosta had earlier indicated that the 3-week hearing that ended Friday would be his last on the case, and that he would issue rulings on key questions until his retirement. And that's the end of the article. Well, I hope Acosta makes the decision to throw out whatever Mr. Nashiri gave his guilty. I think it was 7 charges he admitted to. Well, I hope they're all thrown out. And this is a shame because, like I said before, even if he's guilty, right? Even if he's guilty, we can't trust it because he was tortured. And we could blame the CIA for this and the White House. White House authorized this, gave the CIA carte blanche to do what was necessary to get information from these people. You could thank George Bush. You could thank Dick Cheney. You could thank George Tenet. You could thank Bruce Jessen and James Mitchell for ruining this case and most likely the case against the Guantanamo 5 for the September 11, 2001 attacks. All right, that's the end of the video. Wanted to keep you updated. Listen, have a very good holiday, and I'll see you in the next video. See you later.